Welcome, dear students, to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. K. S. Nagaraja of Deccan College, Pune, teaching the course of Historical Linguistics. In today's module, we look at the sound change and its effects, sometimes also called types of sound changes. We have already are aware of the fact that there are lots of changes take place in the languages. In other words, variety of sound changes take place in human languages. Most of them are accounted for by classifying them in 4 different ways in which the effects of sound change on the sounds of a language are felt. But in this particular course, because of the variety of the changes to be discussed, we will concentrate only on the chronological changes and the syntagmatic changes. In the next module, we will concentrate on the paradigmatic changes. So, because of the variety and the complexity, we divide the type of changes into 2 parts. So the first part will look at the chronological changes and syntagmatic changes. As far as the regular type of changes concerned, the most obvious effect that they have on language is on the sounds themselves occurring in that language. One can examine these from 4 different points of view. Firstly, one can study the relationship between a sound and its substitute. That gives what is known as the chronological relationship. The difference between the two could be quantitative as well as qualitative. Second, one can study the manner in which the relationship between a sound and its neighboring sounds that gives us what is called the syntagmatic relationship has been affected by the given change. It could be assimilation, dissimilation, or metathesis. Thirdly, one can study the manner in which the relationship between a sound and the remaining sounds of the language, that is, its paradigmatic relationship, has been affected by the given change. It could be partial or complete merger, allophonic reassignments, or split of a sound into 2 or more distinct sounds. Fourthly, one can study the way in which the morphophonemic alternations that occur in a language can be affected by sound changes. In addition to modifying or even deleting the existing alternations, sound changes can also introduce new alternations into a language. So the first type is the chronological relationship. Quantitatively, the relationship between a sound and its substitute could be 1 to 0 as in elision, 0 to 1 as in addition, 2 to 1 as in monophonization, 1 to 2 as in diaphonization, and 1 to 1 or no change as in phonetic shift. So we may provide some examples for all these types. First, elision and addition. Depending upon the position of sound elided or added, we can have the following changes. Depending upon the place of occurrence, either in the initial position, if elision takes place, it is called procope. If addition takes place, it is called prothesis. If it happens in the word medial position, elision is syncope, addition is epenthesis. When it happens in word final position, elision is apocope and addition is epithesis. There are many other terminologies employed for this as well. Illustrations for the above 6 types of changes provided below. Various changes are there and lots of examples are available, so only a few are provided here. A good example for procope is the loss of initial ha in the Mysore dialect of Kannada. So haki becomes aki, means bird. Halu becomes alu, means milk, etc. Syncope can be illustrated by the change of trisyllabic words into disyllabic ones through the elision of the second vowel in the same dialect. Kudure in standard Kannada, which has 3 syllables, means horse, it becomes kudre in Mysore dialect, converting into 2 syllables. Adike, arkanat in standard Kannada becomes adke in Mysore Kannada. Bagilu means door in standard Kannada, baglu in Mysore Kannada. Similarly, apocope can be illustrated by the following change in Pali, in which a word final th has been elided. In Sanskrit, we have words ending in consonants like parishat with th ending. In Pali, it becomes parisha. Dharmat in Sanskrit means merit, ablative, becomes dhamma in Pali. Similarly, arthat in Sanskrit becomes atha in Pali, means that is. Prothesis can be illustrated by the following change of Kannada, where a y glide has been added to all words beginning with a front vowel. The protoform, Dravidian protoform, illi, that changes to yilli in Kannada. Iga means now becomes yiga in Kannada. Ettu, to lift, changes to yettu in Kannada. Epenthesis is a process which can be illustrated by the following change of Pali, where the vowel E has been inserted medially after the first consonant in words beginning with snana. Epenthesis is insertion of a vowel within a consonant cluster to declusterize it. So the word snana in Sanskrit means bathing, becomes in Pali sinana. So snana, the cluster has been declusterized by adding e. Similarly, sneha, friendship, becomes sineha. Snigdha, oily, becomes sinidha. This is a very regular formation. A similar situation can be found in other languages also. English word station, when it comes to Indian languages like Punjabi, either it becomes satation or station. Similarly, school becomes sakul or school. When the vowel is added between the clusters, it is a case of epenthesis and not in case of school. Then the next type is called epithesis. Is illustrated by the following change of Kannada, where the vowel u has been added to all words ending in a consonant. For instance, Tamil has vowel ending words like avan, aval, our, etc., which becomes in Kannada avanu, avalu, avaru, etc. No distinction has so far been made in the above classification regarding the type of sound that has been added or elided. In the case of additions In the medial position, however, the term anapthysis, that is also known as swara bhakti, is especially being used to indicate the addition of a vowel in between the two consonants of a cluster. In fact, this has been already illustrated above. A few more instances are given here. Arabic waqt, time, has become in Persian waqit. Vowel E has been added there. Similarly, ism, name, becomes isim. Punjabi example, station becoming satation would be a good example for this. The next types, monophonization, some scholars call it as monophthongization, and similarly diaphonization or diphthongization. These two changes could also be treated as elision and addition respectively, but since the relationship between the sounds involved is more complex than in the case of simple elision and addition, these have been classified separately. The change of Sanskrit au to o in Pali is a good example for monophonization. Gaura in Sanskrit, which means pale, becomes Gora in Pali. Similarly, Moktika means pearl in Sanskrit, becomes Motya in Pali. Aurasa means legitimate in Sanskrit, becomes Vorasa in Pali. Similar changes we can find between Latin and Spanish. Auru in Latin changes to oro, French or, which means gold. Like that we can get examples from different languages. The change of Sanskrit au to o in Pali is a good example for monophonization. For instance, Sanskrit word gaura, which means pale, becomes gora in Pali. Moktika means pearl in Sanskrit, becomes motya in Pali. Aurasa, meaning legitimate in Sanskrit, becomes orasa in Pali, or of this type. Similarly, we can find examples from other languages as well. The next type, that is diaphonization, can be illustrated with an example from Kannada. Standard Kannada has a form like vanake, means pestle. In the dialect of Kannada, Mysore dialect, a va glide is added in the beginning, becomes vanake. So we have diaphonization. Similarly, oppu becoming wappu, which means to agree. Ole, ovan in standard Kannada becomes vale in Mysore Kannada. In fact, part of great vowel shift in English, we have examples like mus, changing to mouse, miss becoming mice, are good examples of diaphonization. Then we have phonetic shift, changes in which a sound and a substitute show mainly qualitative differences are included in this class. A shift may take place because of a change in place of articulation or manner of articulation or position of the velum or position of the glottis. For example, the change of ka to cha before palatal vowels, or of ka to ga intervocalically, unconditional change of aspirated stops into unaspirated ones, or of palatal sibilants into alveolar ones, can be illustrated here. Combinatory change, that is the conditional shift, the change of single intervocal la to la, that is alveolar to retroflex, and of geminate la to la in Marathi can be an example for combinatory change. It involves the conditional shift of lateral, alveolar lateral to retroflex lateral. So, for instance, Sanskrit phala, which involves alveolar lateral, it becomes in Marathi phal, with a retroflex lateral. Kala, time in Sanskrit, becomes Kal in Marathi with a retroflex lateral. Mula with an alveolar lateral means root in Sanskrit becomes Mool in Marathi. The other type of this change is known as isolative change. That means it's an unconditional shift. The change of na to na, that is alveolar na to retroflex na, that has taken place in Prakrit is an instance of isolative or unconditioned shift. It has affected all the instances of na that had occurred in the earlier stage of that language. Sanskrit snana with an alveolar nasal, that means bath, changes in Marathi to nhana with a retroflex nasal. Similarly, swana means sound in Sanskrit becomes sana in Marathi. Nabha means sky in Sanskrit becomes naha in Marathi. Then we move on to the second type of changes known as based on the syntagmatic relationship. There are mainly three different ways in which the relationship between a sound and its neighboring sound in a stretch of speech could be altered by a sound change. Firstly, the sound under consideration may become more similar or identical to the neighboring sound, giving rise to what is called assimilation. This is one of the most common sound changes in languages. Secondly, it may become less similar to its neighbor, thereby introducing dissimilation into the stretch. Thirdly, a sound may interchange the place of occurrence with its neighbor and thereby create the effect called metathesis. One of the major processes which takes place in all the languages is assimilation. This is one of the most common type of changes. This is a change in which a segment is made phonetically more similar or identical with its neighboring segment. One can study this change from three different points of view: the direction of change. If a sound is assimilated to the preceding sound, it is called progressive assimilation, or also known as preservative assimilation. For example, Prakrit has changed the Sanskrit na to ga after ga, so we can show it in a formula type. VC1, C2, V changes to V, C1, C1, V. For instance, Agni, for instance, we have Sanskrit word Agni, Gana, consonant cluster is there in the medial position, it becomes Agi. The second sound changes to become similar to the first sound, so this is progressive assimilation. Ra to the before the. For instance, Pardu, Old Kannada, Pardu, eagle, becomes Haddu. There, Ra-da cluster changes to Da-da cluster, so Ra changes to Da. Mardu, medicine, changes to Maddu in modern Kannada. So we get assimilation here. If two sounds assimilate to one another, both being affected by the sound change, it is called mutual assimilation. For example, Prakrit has changed the Sanskrit da to ja, da to ya before wa. It has also changed the Sanskrit va to ya after da. For instance, Sanskrit word vidyut, here we have a medial cluster of da and ya. There are changes in Prakrit to biji. Here, similarly, that means lightning. The other examples, adya becomes ajya, madhya becoming majha. So as it can be seen that the, when it changes, the being alveolar, it changes one step further and moves towards, in a way, ya, which is a palatal sound, but ya also moves towards the, so we have a, what is called a mutual assimilation. Then based on the nature of the change, the assimilation can be classified into two types. Either it could be complete assimilation or it could be partial assimilation. When a sound like pa changes to ta in a word like sapta, Sanskrit sapta, becoming in Prakrit satta, pa has totally changed to ta, therefore it is a total assimilation. Sapta means 7. Similarly, we have supta becomes sutta, means slept. Gupta becomes gutta, means secret. These are all cases of complete assimilation. On the other hand, it's possible to have partial assimilation. If on the other hand, the change causes the two sounds to be more similar to one another but not identical, it is called partial assimilation. For example, Telugu has changed an initial ka to cha before palatal vowels. So if you look at the protoform, that is the Dravidian protoform, kedi means to perish, changes in Telugu to chedu. Kidumu, to pluck, becomes chidumu. Kevi, which means ear, becomes chevi. In fact, this kind of partial assimilations can be found in many languages. In Sanskrit, udmatta becoming unmatta, again in Prakrit is of this type. Similarly in English, intolerable, impossible, etc. are of this type. Then relation with the environment. If a segment assimilates to an adjacent segment, it is an immediate assimilation. For example, the Sanketi dialect of Tamil has changed an earlier e to u after pa. So Tamil word piti, to catch, becomes in Sanketi pudi. Pinam, which means corpse in Tamil, becomes punu in Sanketi. Similarly, pidi, to squeeze in Tamil, becomes pudi in Sanketi Tamil. If on the other hand, a segment assimilates to a non-adjacent segment, it is called a distant assimilation. For example, Kannada has changed an earlier a to e when it was followed by a high vowel in the next syllable. So protoform kevi, which means ear, becomes kivi in Kannada. Teli, to clear, becomes tili in Kannada. Veli means white, becomes bili in Kannada. So all are of this type. It may be pointed out in passing that assimilation is one of the most prominent syntagmatic effects of sound change on the sounds of a language. One of the special types of assimilation is known as umlaut or vowel harmony. A good example is from German, where Old High German had skoni compared to Middle High German skone. Between them, the difference is the back vowel becoming front under the influence of the final front vowel is the special feature of this particular change. So next we move to the second important change called dissimulation. Dissimulation, this is opposite of assimilation. Similar sounds change to become dissimilar, whether wholly or partially, is called dissimulation. Though this is also quite common in languages, it is not that common as assimilation. Here also we can consider the direction of change. Either it could be progressive dissimulation or regressive dissimulation. Here an example can be given from a language Manipuri, where we have a proto-form of Manipuri, Thak Thok. For instance, here we have two aspirate consonants occurring in the construction, but in the Manipuri proper, that is in the current Manipuri, present Manipuri, one of the aspirates becomes de-aspirated, so two similar sounds, out of that one becomes de-aspirated. To that extent it becomes dissimilar, so we get Thak Tok. The second sound becomes unaspirated. So this is one of the features of dissimulation. Similar examples can be cited. Then the second type here is the regressive dissimulation. The good example here we have between, of course, about the aspirated stops. When aspirated stops are repeated in the same word, that means occurring at the beginning of a syllable, loses its aspiration if another aspirated stop comes at the end of the same syllable or at the beginning of the next syllable. So the proto-form of the Sanskrit form babhuva is supposed to be bhabhuva with the initial aspiration. It means it was. So the proto-form, the reconstructed one, contains two aspirated forms. As the language Sanskrit doesn't allow two aspirated forms, the first one becomes de-aspirated or unaspirated. Similarly, we have the reconstructed, the proto-form dhadati, he places, becomes dadhati. Similarly, dhruhas, injurious, becomes in Sanskrit dhruhas. Here also we can think of what is known as mutual dissimulation. This could take place if two neighboring segments dissimulate to one another. However, in this again we have two types based on the relation with the environment. Immediate dissimulation. A good example for this would be the change of Kannada A to O after an initial ma in the Kuruba dialect of Kannada. Kannada, the word motte, which means egg, we have mo, O and A, O in the first syllable, A in the final syllable, belong to same level, mid-level. In the Kuruba dialect, it changes to matte, that means the first vowel O gets lower, it becomes a, so matte. So masale, similarly, which means crocodile, becomes masale. Mole, which means breast, becomes male. So in all this you can see that vowels of same height become dissimulated, or one of them becomes lower compared to the other. Then the next one is next type is called distant dissimulation. Here we have an example from Tamil. Tamil has changed the vowel A of the proto-language into E when followed by the vowel A in the next syllable. So in words of C optional, VCV type, proto-form etaru, in Tamil it becomes itaru, to stumble. Proto-form etai, left, in Tamil it becomes itai. Viral, finger, in proto-form becomes viral, etc. Another interesting example is that of Bodo language, where a vowel with high tone, when followed by another vowel with high tone, in the next syllable loses its tone. So by that way it becomes dissimilar. So some examples are provided. After assimilation and dissimulation, metathesis is the third most important change which can be seen in languages. Of course, it is not that common to see metathesis as a process, as a regular feature, though occasionally we may see it in one or two words. This is a change in which two neighboring segments interchange their places of occurrence in a stretch of speech. One can think of two distinct varieties here. One, instances in which the interchanging segments are found to occur side by side, that is immediate metathesis, this can be called. Second, instances in which they are separated by one or more segments, then it is called distant metathesis. A good example for the former is a metathesis of Telugu, where the first vowel and the following consonant occurring in words of CVCV type have interchanged their places of occurrence syntagmatically under certain restricted environments. So the example, protoform thav, to dig, changes in Telugu to thravu. Urd, to rub, which is the protoform, becomes in Telugu ruddu. Era, to increase, which is the protoform, changes to revu. Another example would be the interchange of the places of occurrence between the fricatives and the nasals in Prakrit. Sanskrit, asman, which means we, there we have sa and ma combination. In Prakrit, it becomes ha, where we have ma and ha combination. So metathesis, that is the interchange of sounds, has taken place. Similarly, grishma, summer, becomes gimha. Vismaya, surprise, becomes vimhaya. The change of lexical items of the type C1 VC2 to C2 VC1 would be a good example for distant metathesis. No illustrations of the regular type are available at the moment for this particular change. So in this particular module, to summarize, we have seen that the various types of chronological changes, where what happens to the sounds when they occur in a sequence, whether something gets deleted, something is added. And the second important one, what happens to the sounds in a syntagmatic environment. This also what happens to the neighboring sounds, but here is the change is important. In the earlier one, it is addition or deletion. Here it is the nature of the sound changes to become either similar or dissimilar, or they get interchange in their positions. So in the next module, we will look at other type of changes which are usually considered under paradigmatic relationship or paradigmatic changes, as they are called.